We are back this week with a stories from the other side. I know it's been a bit since you've had one of these fantastic stories. I love sharing these episodes because it's so important to understand that we can make it through, that other women have made it through. We can learn from them, we can share in the struggles, and we can understand that things really do get better on the other side. So I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest. Let's get started. Welcome to the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast dedicated to helping women navigate the emotional journey that is divorce. I'm your host, Erica, and if you're trying to figure out life after the big D, welcome to the club. Whether you're contemplating divorce or dealing with the aftermath or any of the many phases in between, the club has got you covered. Each week, you'll hear stories from women who have been in your shoes. This isn't about spilling tea on divorce details. This is about giving you the tools to take control of your own healing journey. Listen in weekly for advice, tips, and tools to help you move through each stage of the process. Hey guys, it's Erica, host of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, and we are back with another episode. Today is a Stories from the Other Side. Now, these are all about sharing real-life triumphs of women who have made it through their divorce, who have restarted their lives, and who are happy and thriving on the other side. So today, my guest is Darlene Agag. She is CEO of the Hestia Group. Now, the Hestia Group is a concierge relocation service. So we are going to chat about relocating, uprooting, restarting, and all of that. So thank you, Darlene, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I was super excited to talk to you because you have such a specialty and such an experience in helping people relocate. I have had to relocate a couple times. You know, the one that doesn't really count, high school to college. Okay, you're young, everybody's restarting, everybody's on the same journey. When I worked in corporate, I relocated from California to Minnesota to start a whole new team. Was not expecting the challenges. We were freshly married, so we didn't have kids, there wasn't a school system, but I didn't expect the loss of my support system and what an upheaval it was. And then once again, I did it after my divorce and now having to relocate with a child in tow and be concerned about making sure that I'm getting in the right school district. So it's quite a thing. We don't think about it, but it is such a big move that hits all aspects of our life. So I'm excited to dive into this with you today.
Yeah, thank you. Been through all of those as well. So I have firsthand experience as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so first, before we get into that part, tell us a little bit about your journey and your story so we can understand what you've been through and kind of the makeup of your family and where you've landed.
Sure. So my background is I worked in corporate America for 20 years, lived in Manhattan with my former husband and my two kids, and then decided to leave my job because I was going through a divorce and it was just too much to take care of my kids and get divorced. In the middle of all that, I decided to move out to New Jersey. So I did everything that you shouldn't do at once. I did it all together. So it's like rip the Band-Aid off at once. I got divorced, I moved, and I left my job, right? Which is, I'm sure a lot of people that are listening or are going through this, I can empathize because even going through one of those things is not easy, let alone throwing them all in, at once. But realize that in order to be there for my kids, I think going back to corporate America was just too draining, but I needed to work. So I did end up starting my own business, which was a relocation company, because I found the transition, even moving 20 miles from Manhattan to northern New Jersey, and this was the town I grew up in, I found it really challenging, right? Coming back here, having to get my kids acclimated, having to figure out as a single parent, because their father then moved to Florida. So I was really on my own, having to figure out how to navigate that, get to be in with friends, moving to a suburb where it's all couples. And then all of a sudden it's, oh, and here's the single mom, right? So the transition was challenging.
Yeah, because each of those roles, you have a certain identity, right? And a certain support structure. Even if you don't, like when I transitioned in my corporate role, my support structure in the field was more close knit than it was at corporate, but it still was a support structure. It still was an outlet and a structure and of meetings all day and people to interact with. And so uprooting those. And I think so often women are in that place, when you're looking at transitioning into divorce, you're thinking through all those things. How am I going to continue to do my job? Or maybe you're not working and you need to think about getting a job. And so all of those pieces need to change. They don't need to change, but they probably will change because you become somebody completely different. You've learned and grown and moved through it.
Yeah, well, you're trying to keep your balance
Yeah.
while at the same time manage your children through the process, right? And we as moms or women have to really put on that brave face and just keep marching forward,
Yeah.
regardless of the chaos that's going on around us, right? So having support, but I also think a big part of it, and I found this, and I think you and I talked about this, is who can you trust? Right? Who are those people that you can trust around you, that you can share things? And that was my biggest challenge, right? Which is why I love what you're doing, creating a safe space
Mm.
to be able to share what's going on and also have other people relate to that, because people can be sympathetic, but having empathy doesn't always happen because they don't necessarily understand what you're going through, right?
Yeah. The trust is such a big part because healing is messy. And there were days where I was just really hurting. And I was wanting to complain and I wanted to blame him and I wanted to throw all of the hate around. And that's a lot for somebody else to handle. And so when you're going through that healing and all of a sudden you're hating on one day and the next day you're a little more balanced and you're like, hey, okay, it is what it is. I'm going to figure it out. That is hard on any friendship or relationship because it's so much. And so it is important to have a few people, but figuring out who you can trust. I know too, when we moved in here. So if I talk about just the move after divorce, it was the same thing. Like, is there anybody around? How are we going to meet people? Who is in the area for my son to play with? And do I like them? Are they going to be somebody that I can also hang out with and chat with and get support with? It's a lot of unknowns when you first relocate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're known as a couple, and then all of a sudden you're thrust into this single world, but having children makes it more difficult because you can't just go and live your life as a single person. So it's kind of a balance you have to strike. And I think we spoke about this as, for a long time, it was just about my kids and making sure that I was putting them in the right direction. And everything else kind of became secondary because that was my priority, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to do that. I only had one child and I really struggled with being able to handle the normal role of being a mom. I was still working corporate, but now not having help with dinners or with bedtimes, his emotions and my emotions, right? And it seems like they all hit the fan at the wrong time, right? You're just trying to make dinner and the emotions overwhelm you and you really want to walk away and cry and you can't. So if you're a mom out there being like, "Yep, that is what it feels like." It doesn't stay like that forever and it's okay to be real messy. I think that was one of the favorite things that a therapist had said to me is like, "You're not going to do it perfect, but you're going to keep trying." And you're gonna own the times that you make a mistake and own the times that you do things that you don't want to, because kids, they learn and grow and adjust so much faster than we do as adults. And so they'll get over stuff way faster than we would.
Well, I think we're also inherently hard on ourselves. I know I am, to have to be I think our generation, we feel like we have to be so many different things. And I'm really hard on myself and I expect so much from myself as a mother, as a, friend, as a business person. And I think it's also like, I'm learning this. This is definitely self-reflection for me, but giving myself a little bit of a break, giving myself being kind to myself. And I know it sounds kind of cliche, but it's really a big thing for me to have to learn, is like that I do count, right? That and give myself a little grace and give myself a little kindness because I'm going to make mistakes. I do make mistakes. I'm not perfect, but this has been, I mean, I've been divorced for, or separated. This will be my, in 11 years. And it's taken me a lot of time and self-reflection to get there to say, it's okay. It's okay that you're not perfect. And so I think that's a big thing when we go through this, all of us, whoever's gone through this, it's hard, when we have to be gentle with ourselves.
It definitely grace was a theme for me, and it was something that I didn't realize was one of my core values until this experience of being able to look at and say, "Hey, a lot of people are hurting in this, and hurt people do hurt other people." And so, can I just extend a little grace? If I weren't doing so well and reacted, how would I wanna be treated? And it was actually hardest to turn that grace on myself.
It is. I think it's the hardest thing. And I also think the other thing that I learned with my kids is it's okay to be upset in front of them. It's okay to tell them this is hard because I think I know for years I was like, oh, I have to pretend everything's okay, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, that's not life. And I think by me showing them that I do have bad days or something is hard, especially because I have boys, it's given them the platform to be able to say when they have a bad day or or let it out or not expect that they have to be perfect or they can't show emotion. Right. And I think that's a really important thing for us to learn because when we were raised, it was like, don't show emotion, just suck it up, get through it. And I don't subscribe to that. I think letting it out is healthier than holding it all in and pretending we're okay. And that vulnerability and being able to share that with other people. Granted, there has to be discernment there, right? You can't just walk down the street and just tell your story to everyone. But with your family and close friends, I think it's okay to share that.
Yeah, and that there's always a pendulum. We move one way real far, and then we swing real far the other direction until we kind of settle and move towards the middle. I thought a lot about my parents and watching their marriage. And so thinking about my son and what is he going to learn from this and how is he going to be set up for the future? I never saw my parents have difficult conversations. I never saw emotions in the house. I thought it was like, oh, you found your person you love. And guess what? Now you just both want the same things. You both want the kids and the yard and the family time. And I never knew the communication skills that it was gonna take. So I showed up to my marriage with that belief that, well, we said yes. We said I do, so doesn't that mean we all want the same things at this point? Why are we fighting about what we're doing this weekend or where things are going, and why aren't you supporting me?
Right. Well, I think we're all because I've been in therapy for a long time too. And the one thing I learned is I'm learning those skills while I'm starting to teach them to my children. So we're in this challenging generation where we're trying to undo what we saw. And it's not a knock on our parents, it's just what they knew, right? And how they learned. But we're trying to be more aware of that while also teaching our children so they don't have to go through what we go through. And I talk to my boys all the time, my older ones dating and I talk to them and we have real conversations about how do we break these patterns, these generational patterns that have been going on? How do you stand up for who you are and what you believe and what you want and keep your eyes open, right? And also you don't have to settle. And so I think that's what you and I were talking about as well is how do we get our kids to move forward. We want the world to be a better place. We want them to have good marriages. We want them to be able to talk. We don't want them to have to go through what we went through. If they are, and if they do, then we will be there to help them because there's no guarantees, but at least we can share with them our wisdom and knowledge that we've gained, right? So that maybe we can help them to know when they go into a marriage, like you said, it's not just everything's perfect and how do you communicate and so that you don't get yourself into those situations, right?
Yeah, and that is such a big piece, and we don't wanna swing the other way where it's emotional outbursts all the time, right? And are we going to have some? Yes, because again, that pendulum is swinging back and forth and it's trying to figure out where to land. And so I've done similar, trying to focus on my son and being a woman. Okay, so now we've got this added layer of how a woman deals with emotions is different than how a man deals with emotions. And so, how am I setting him up for success to understand? Like, how do we both have needs and wants that matter? Even though I'm the parent, even though I am the one that gets to make the decisions at the end of the day, showing him that, hey, your thoughts do matter and what can they control? Can they control and pick dinner? Can they control and pick what movie we go to, right? There are things that I'm helping him like it was funny the other day. It was picking out what's for dinner. He's like, "Oh, pasta." And then he was instantly like, "Oh, but I know you don't like pasta and you don't eat pasta. Okay, I'll just pick something else." And I was like, "No, dude, we can have pasta. Like I can figure out something else tonight. This is a good night. I'm not stressed about work. Like we can do things." So that he's learning what it means to co-create in a relationship versus so much of, my learnings was it was not a dictatorship. Like, I thought we were both aligned, so I thought I was helping move us towards what we both wanted. Hey there, it's Erica, your guide at the Crazy Ex-Wives Club. I want to take a moment to express how much your feedback means to us. Your ratings, your reviews, they are like fuel for our journey together. They not only brighten our day, but they help other women find the support and the guidance they need. Leaving a rating and review is super easy, and it makes a world of difference. If you're listening on Spotify, simply scroll down to the bottom of the podcast page and then tap on rate. If you're tuning in on iTunes, head over to the podcast page, scroll down, and click on write a review. It only takes a minute, but it could help someone else find this podcast and change their life. Your voice matters, your feedback helps us grow, so take a moment to share your thoughts and experiences. Together, we can help spread the word to support even more women. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Let's continue to support each other and make a difference, one review at a time. So how do we communicate those needs? There's such a huge opportunity when it comes to divorce. So not saying that we learn all these skills and that every marriage now works. They're not all going to work. But in the divorce process itself, there is such a huge opportunity to teach our children that it can just be the next chapter. It can create clear communication and collaboration and partnership. And how do you work together with somebody who, you tolerate or you're just okay with, but you can set aside your emotions and the pity party and the victimhood and the whatever else, the attack stuff that you want to do to say, hey, there's a greater good in the middle. And that is such a fabulous lesson for kids to learn, that they can put aside the emotional rants for the greater good that people are trying to create together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I can't really talk to that because my kid's father is not part of their life. But the thing that I can talk to is trying to be the mother and the father, trying to have, it's striking a balance no matter what you do, right? Being sweet and sour, trying to be the disciplinarian and the nurturer. And so I do think there's a lot of lessons they can take from our behavior, even how we handle the divorce, right? I never talk bad about their father. I don't bring him down. That's not my place. You have to be self-reflective. Listen, there were parts of the marriage that in my self-reflection, I know what I did and we just weren't the right people for each other at the end of the day, right? So tearing him down is not going to it's not going to help. It doesn't make me feel better. It's not going to help them, but ultimately I told them that when I first told them that we were getting separated, I said, I tell you guys to be kind to each other. I tell you to love each other. But if I'm not setting that example for you, I can talk all I want, but if I'm saying something and then doing something different, that's what you're going to learn, right? And ultimately, we all have choices. And I subscribe to this with my kid, and I tell my kids this all the time. We have choices. You try something, you give it your best effort, and if it doesn't work, it's okay. It's okay to walk away and try something else. I think there were friends that I didn't tell that I was getting separated for 2 years because we hid it really well, right? And I was ashamed and I felt like I failed at something really big. And and it was embarrassing to me. And in retrospect, I had to go through that. But the thing is, at the end of all this, right, it's not a failure. We tried. But what are we teaching our kids? We're teaching them if you go to a college and you don't like it, you have to stay there for 4 years just because you made that choice. You might make a choice that's right at the time, but you might evolve and change, and then that changes. And if you give it your best effort, it's okay to have a choice and make a change, right? But what we saw growing up was parents just stayed together for financial reasons or whatever because no one got divorced. It was a stigma. And I think we have to change that as our generation is it's not a stigma. It's a choice that you make for yourself and for your family. And I think my children are better off because I did get divorced, right? And I had a very wise friend that when I was trying to make a decision, she turned around to me and she said, "Don't stay in a marriage for your children. The children will be okay. It will be worse for them if you stay in a bad marriage." And for a long time, I thought, well, they need both parents together. They need this structure. But the truth is, if the structure is broken, if they're living in a house that's falling down, they're not going to feel safe, right? So they're better having one consistent message that's coming to them or parents that are co-parenting and learning to work together versus staying in something just because you think it's the right path.
Right. Or staying, I'll wait till they're older. It'll be easier when they're older.
I think that's harder.
It's hard, right? And my son was young. He was 4, but I've talked to lots of other parents with adult age kids, college age kids, and those kids are just as hurt. In fact, they're probably more hurt because they feel like they got led down this illusion for their whole life. Their whole fairy tale of what they thought it meant to be married just got crushed at a point when they're trying to build their own. And so there isn't a thing of like, oh, I'll wait till they're in their 20s and then they'll understand. They'll logically understand. It's not a logical decision. It's emotional. There's grief around it. You get to the point of making the logical choice that hey, this isn't the right fit, but it is the emotions that come up all around it.
Yeah, and I think then, as we have to build our lives, rebuild our lives in our 50s or our 60s, right? And for me, at least, my kids were 4 and 8. They kept me busy so I could get through and work through all of this, right? Not that they were my crutch, but I see friends whose kids are 18, 20 years old, and now they're like, well, now where are we going to go? Now what are we going to do? Am I going to go live by myself somewhere? Right. And that it's in a way like we think it's better, but then we also hurt ourselves as far as like not being able to build our lives separately. Right. But there's no formula. Like you have to do what's right for you. Right. And there's no judgment and there's no formula and there's no right time when you're ready or you're not, right? And that's a lot of times friends will come and say, I'm struggling. And I say, listen, if you're ready, do it. If you're not, don't. There's no judgment. If you have to live in your shoes, walk in your shoes every day. So you have to make the choice that's right for you, right? And it's so personal. And it's also a financial thing, right? I mean, it's expensive to run 2 households, and that is real stress, and that is real life. And you know, setting up 2 households is it's a real dilemma for most people in this world, right?
Yeah. Because you can be happy if you stay, you can be happy if you go. It is you lining up to the choice that you can live with. Did you do the work to really identify, are we just not the right fit anymore? Did it serve its purpose? Was it a chapter, not a forever? The money part is super stressful right now. It's probably the top 2 comments that float in all the time on Instagram are, how am I ever going to afford this? And how do I do this so it doesn't hurt my kids? and it comes up every single week. I'm not leaving because I don't know how I'll ever be able to rent a place in their same school district, or I'm going to just stay in this marriage and sacrifice myself because I don't want to upset them. The reality is that if you're hurting, they're hurting too. And so figuring out, again, back to the little word of the episode, grace. How do you extend grace in these situations to the entire family who's going to have to grieve and process through it and get them the right support and know that everything is going to be okay, but it takes time.
Right. And you have to believe that, and you have to, what you're doing to me, I wish I had this when I was going through it, because just hearing, it's very isolating. You know, you feel like everyone's married except you. Everybody, and people don't really share a lot of these things. So I think being able to relate, know that people are going through it, they've had a hard time, and they've come through the other side, and how did they do it, and be able to talk about that, I think is very liberating. And then again, whatever choice you come to, it's your personal choice. But in my experience, and I had a very, very, very hard time because I'm alone, right? So my kids are, they're doing okay, right? But it's been hard. I sit here and I was tired. I was, run down trying to run a business, start a business, take care of my kids, run around, do all this stuff. It's hard, and we need to help each other. So I will open myself up to for you. Like, I'm here if anybody ever needs something, or to talk, or you know, I will make myself available, because I know we need a tribe to get through this. It's really hard. And I empathize. It's really hard.
It is hard. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not anything that any of us would have chosen, but it is something we all had to walk through. And I think before we close this episode, because you have had a ton of experience in helping people relocate. If people are out there and that is their biggest fear, because, mortgage rates are crazy, which we had an episode on creative mortgage alternatives. So if that's where you're struggling, go check out. It was Aaron with Hello Divorce. But when it comes to like the emotions of relocating, are there any tips or things that you recommend people do to make it a little bit easier?
Well, I just think you have to have people that you can surround yourself with to talk to. I mean, for our clients, a lot of my job is to be there to support. Also, like, I see a lot of times when the man has to move out, they still are depending on the woman, which is hard because they're used to, and I'm sounding a little sexist, and I don't mean it that way, but a lot of times you have to set up another household, and the women tend to multitask and do everything, or vice versa. It could be a woman moving out and a man the same way. It could be either way, but there's usually one that's more dominant, right, in taking care of things in the household. So I find that you have to support the other person, and you have to find people that can help you do that. But what I try and do with my clients too, and I think probably the most important thing, is one step at a time. So you can get very overwhelmed by saying, I have to pack my house, move, find a new place to live, get my kids in school, do this. It's like, all right, let's come up with a plan. What are we going to do today? Today, I'm going to figure out what houses I can look at, right? Where I can rent, what I can afford. That's it. Just like, don't maybe make a to-do list or what you have to do, but don't feel like you have to do it all at once, because I think with anything, it's so overwhelming. Just take it in steps. And then when you break it down, it just seems more manageable.
Well, it also helps us get clear on all those individual pieces. So whether you make a task list, or I'm a really big fan of mind mapping. Okay, so I put like the topic in the center of the page, and then I put the little bubbles of things I have to figure out. So I'm looking at a relocation right now, right? And I need to figure out what my budget is. I need to figure out where I want to move. I need to figure out how many bedrooms or what I need in the house. I need to figure out in my current house what stays and what goes, right? So there's all these topics and I don't have all the answers. And when I look at all of them, I freeze because I don't know. Like I'm not 100% clear on the city yet. Okay, that's still getting clear for me. That's still percolating. If I choose to, action that right now and I can't do the rest until I have that answer, it will create fear and anxiety. And so instead, I'm like, hey, okay, that one, getting clear. I'll stay curious. I'll keep looking. I'll wait to see what continues to pop up. What can I do? I can start to clear out my current house. I can start to look at everything and be like, do I love this? Do I want to carry this forward? Because for me, every move, I kind of you transform into a new version of you. You level up into your next version. Does the next version of Erica still need, these pots and pans? Like I know what's going to stay and what's going to go. And some of the boxes have already gotten packed, like the servingware, right? The daily use stuff you don't use, it's all packed up. It's moved somewhere else because now I'm creating more space in where I'm at right now too. And I'm starting to move through that transition. So I love that. One step at a time, you guys. We can't figure it out.
Yeah, I think that it's just, and that's with anything though, right? We can, because you don't know where tomorrow somebody could come to you and say, hey, I have a house here. And then all of a sudden a light bulb's gonna connect, and then you click, and then you're gonna, so you just don't know what's gonna happen, that you have to trust the path, but do what you do, right?
Yeah, and that's the fun part. So now I call it riding the wave. Okay? So think about if you were surfing. I've never surfed, but you want to stay on the top of that wave, right? You don't want to fall behind. You don't want to go too fast and barrel over the front and get spun and sucked underneath. You want to stay on the top where it's easy breezy and you can see everything. And so that's literally just like I think about like the little feet on the surfboard being able to move forward and back. There's not a house right now that's shown up in my feed. I know that I'll know it when it does because all of a sudden I'll be like, that's how I wound up in this house. I mean, we closed in 28 days. Everyone's like, that doesn't happen. I'm like, oh, it does. When I find the right one, magic can happen and it can happen for you too. So if there's pieces that aren't clear, if there are pieces of your puzzle that haven't fallen into place, don't stress out about it. Acknowledge it. Okay, that's something I need more clarity on. Call it in. Hey, universe, looking for help on it. Show me the signs, and then set it aside and focus on the things that you can control and can put your energy into.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice.
I love it. Well, thank you, Darlene, for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your stories. I think there's a couple of those big emotions you talked about. I was like, oh, it's those little nuggets, you guys, that so often we just don't hear it. And then somebody else says it, how angry they were, hurt, or I know what it was. When you talked about you felt like you failed. I felt like I failed too. And it wasn't something I realized until far after. And so I just know that sharing these stories helps other people feel not alone. So thank you for showing up and sharing your story. For those of you guys listening, give yourself some grace this week. Take some time to find some joy in what you're doing, even if it is as little as a cup of coffee or a hot shower or a walk in the park. Find something you love and then take care of yourself until we return next week. And that's it. Another great episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast for women learning how to heal from their divorce. Tune in next week for more advice and tips to help you figure out life after divorce. And until then, give yourself grace, do the best you can, and know that this is all part of the process.